Please, sir, anything helps. God bless you. The man in the tailored suit did not even slow his stride. Yet the woman walking just behind him halted abruptly, her briefcase sliding from her grasp. The elderly woman remained seated on the blistering sidewalk, her frail hands clutching a cardboard sign as though it were the only anchor still holding her to this world. Her skin bore the deep cracks and withering of endless days under the sun, her eyes dimmed by the passage of time, but something in her expression lingered, something tender and deeply familiar, like a forgotten lullaby that suddenly stirs the heart. The man in the suit froze mid-step, color drained from his face the instant recognition struck him, yet she gazed straight through him as if he were merely another stranger passing by. That elderly woman on the sidewalk had once saved his life, and the steps he was about to take on her behalf would finally reveal a truth long buried deep within. Come with me as we step into this deeply moving story. But first, many people insisted this channel would never succeed, that audiences no longer cared for tales like these. Together, you and I can prove them wrong. Hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who truly needs it. Thank you. Now let us begin. The penthouse occupied the highest floor of the tallest building in Buckhead. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed breathtaking views. Italian marble gleamed underfoot, and a kitchen could easily prepare a feast for 20. Yet every single evening Marcus Hale sat down to dinner completely alone. He stood as one of the most successful men in Atlanta, the driving force behind Hale Development Group, a vast real estate empire he had raised from nothing. His name graced luxury condominiums, sprawling shopping centers, and soaring office towers that stretched across Georgia and into the Carolinas. His wealth carried more zeros than most could even imagine. Magazines hailed him as a visionary. Business journals praised his brilliance, yet no one called him after business hours. His phone rang constantly throughout the day with calls from investors, attorneys, and board members. But once evening settled, only silence remained. That silence filled the vast rooms like a heavy fog, pressing down on the chest until breathing itself grew difficult. Marcus would arrive home, loosen his tie, and stand motionless in the expansive living area, eyes fixed on the glittering Atlanta skyline below. The city sparkled like a distant sea of diamonds, beautiful, yet utterly cold, much like the life he had built. He had no wife, no children, and no truly close friends. Business partners respected him, employees feared him, but not one soul on earth truly knew the man behind the empire. His refrigerator stayed stocked thanks to a dedicated housekeeper, organic produce, imported cheeses, fresh fruit flown in from California. Still, no one was there to cook a meal, no one to share it with, and no one to ask how his day had gone. Most evenings he ate standing at the kitchen counter, quickly finishing whatever required the least effort. Sometimes he skipped dinner entirely, simply pouring a glass of whiskey and sitting alone in the darkness while the city lights twinkled like faraway stars. People envied Marcus Hale. They saw the impeccable suits, the luxury cars, and the breathtaking penthouse. They saw a man who had conquered the world. They never glimpsed the lonely boy still living inside him, the boy who had grown up with nothing, who had lost everything before he even reached his teenage years, and who had been rescued by a woman whose name he still whispered to himself late at night when the silence grew too heavy to bear. Evelyn. He had not seen her in decades. Once, when his fortune first bloomed, he had tried to locate her and even hired a private investigator, but the trail had vanished like smoke. Marcus convinced himself it was fine. He had moved forward and constructed something extraordinary from the ruins of his childhood. Yet moving forward and truly healing are not the same, and Marcus Hale had never healed. He had simply learned to function around the wound. Every triumph felt hollow. Every milestone rang empty, because the one person who had shown him what it meant to matter, the one person who who had made him believe he could become someone was gone. He had never been given the chance to say thank you. That ache followed him everywhere, through boardrooms and lavish business dinners, through rooftop parties and charity galas. It lingered in the back of his mind like a splinter he could never quite reach. He possessed everything a man could desire, yet none of it was enough. The one thing he wanted most could not be purchased with money. He longed to find Evelyn, and he was beginning to fear he never would. But life has a beautiful way of delivering exactly what we need at the precise moment we least expect it. Marcus Hale was about to discover that sometimes the people we have searched for are closer than we ever imagined. To truly understand why that elderly woman on the sidewalk meant everything to him, we must travel back to a modest apartment in East Atlanta where the walls were thin, the winters biting, and a young boy learned the single most important lesson of his life. Marcus was only a small child when his father left. He remembered little of the man, just a deep voice, the faint scent of motor oil, and then one morning an empty chair at the kitchen table. His mother Vivian never spoke of it. She simply rose the next day and went to work, holding down to jobs 6 days a week, cleaning offices before dawn and waitressing at a diner until closing time. She would return home well after midnight, feet swollen and eyes hollow, then check on her sleeping son, kiss his forehead gently, and collapse onto the couch because she was too exhausted to reach her own bed. Vivian loved her boy deeply. That was never in doubt. But love alone cannot pay the bills, and a young child cannot stay home by himself. So Vivian found Evelyn. Evelyn Patterson was in her mid-40s and lived just a few blocks away in a ground-floor apartment brightened by a window box of flowers. She had raised 6 children of her own, all grown now. Her husband had passed away some time earlier, and she needed a modest income, just enough to keep the lights on and those flowers watered. Vivian could offer only a small weekly amount. Evelyn looked at her, then at the shy little boy hiding behind his mother's leg, and said simply, "Bring him by tomorrow morning." On that first day, Marcus refused to release his mother's hand. He stood frozen in Evelyn's doorway, eyes wide and bottom lip trembling. Vivian knelt, whispered for him to be good, and left for work. Marcus remained rooted in place. Evelyn did not rush him. She settled into her old rocking chair and began humming a soft gospel hymn, low and soothing, the kind of sound that fills a room like warm water filling a tub. After a while, Marcus took one cautious step inside, then another, and finally sat on the floor near her feet. Evelyn simply kept humming. By the end of that first week, he was following her around the apartment like a small shadow. She spoke to him while she cooked, patiently explaining every step. "You see this, baby? You have to let the onions sweat before you add the garlic. Patience, everything good takes patience." She showed him how to crack an egg without leaving shells in the bowl. She taught him to fold laundry into perfect little squares. Each afternoon, she read him stories from the old picture books she had saved from her own children. And every evening before Vivian arrived, Evelyn would cradle his face gently in both hands and say the same tender words, "You don't have to be rich to be somebody, baby. You just have to be kind." Marcus heard that sentence countless times throughout those childhood years, and each time it settled deeper into his soul. Evelyn became his entire world. His mother worked long hours. His father had vanished. But Evelyn was always there. Her apartment smelled of cinnamon, fried chicken, and well-loved books. It smelled of safety. It smelled like home. She taught him to read before kindergarten began. She helped with homework as school grew harder. She shared stories of her own life growing up poor in rural Georgia, picking cotton as a little girl, and the day she watched Martin Luther King speak on television and realized the world could change. People are going to look at you and see a poor black boy from the wrong side of Atlanta. she told him once when he was around 9. But you know what I see? I see a king. And don't you ever let anybody tell you different. Those simple, powerful words planted something inside Marcus that would grow strong for the rest of his life. For those important childhood years, Evelyn served as his anchor, his teacher, his grandmother, his best friend, the one person who made him feel truly seen. Then Vivian became ill. It began with a persistent cough, followed by rapid weight loss and ever longer hospital stays. Vivian was diagnosed with lung cancer. Without insurance, the treatments proved costly, and within months she was gone. Marcus was still a young boy. He remembered the social worker arriving at the apartment and telling him to pack a small bag. When he asked where he was going, she replied, "Foster care." He begged to stay with Evelyn instead. The woman shook her head. "She is not a legal guardian." "I'm sorry, sweetie." Marcus ran to Evelyn's apartment and pounded on the door. When she opened it, he threw himself into her arms, sobbing, "They are taking me away, Miss Evelyn. Please don't let them take me." Evelyn held him so tightly he could feel her heart beat against his cheek. Tears streamed down her face too. "I am going to fight for you, baby. I promise. I am going to fight." But she could not. She had no legal standing, no money for an attorney, and no way to challenge a system that paid no attention to an older woman with empty pockets and a heart full of love. The social worker returned the next morning. Marcus climbed into the car with his small bag, pressed his face to the window, and watched Evelyn standing on the sidewalk grow smaller and smaller until she disappeared. He never saw her again. The world he had known, the world of cinnamon, gospel hymns, and someone who believed he was a king, vanished with her. That was many years ago, and Marcus Hale had carried Evelyn in his heart like a second heartbeat ever since. During all those years, life had not been gentle with Evelyn Patterson. After Marcus was taken away, she tried desperately to bring him back. She called social services, visited the county office, and wrote letters. The system moved slowly, and Evelyn possessed no power to hurry it along. Eventually, a caseworker informed her that the boy had been placed with a family elsewhere. No, she could not have the address. No, she could not visit. The case was closed. Evelyn sat on the steps of her apartment that evening and cried until she had no tears left. Yet she kept going, because that was who Evelyn was. She had spent her entire life simply keeping going. She found work with another family, then another, and another still. For many years, Evelyn Patterson raised other people's children. She rocked them to sleep, packed their lunches, wiped their tears, tied their shoes, and taught them to be kind. Family after family, child after child, and none of them ever returned to find her. That is the quiet truth about domestic work in America. The women who raise our children and hold our families together are often among the most invisible people in the country. Most work without contracts, without health insurance, and without retirement benefits. They pour their hearts into other people's homes, and when they grow old, when their backs give out and their hands begin to shake, nothing waits for them, no pension, no safety net, and no thank you. Evelyn was one of them. She worked until her body simply would not allow it any longer. Her knees had given out. Her hands ached constantly with arthritis. The families stopped calling. The last family she cared for let her go with a small final payment and a card that read, "We'll miss you." They never called again. Evelyn's husband had passed away years earlier. Her savings were modest, barely enough to cover a few months of rent. Then there was Kendra, Evelyn's only daughter. Kendra had once been a bright girl with good grades and a beautiful smile. But somewhere in her 20s, she fell in with the wrong crowd, then the wrong habits, and addiction swallowed her whole. Evelyn tried everything: rehab programs, prayer, and desperate pleas, but addiction does not listen to a mother's tears. Kendra disappeared into the streets, and the few times she returned it was only for money. When Evelyn had nothing left to give, Kendra stopped coming altogether. So Evelyn was truly alone. Rent increased while her savings dwindled. She fell behind 1 month, then 2. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday. She packed what she could into 2 garbage bags and walked out of the apartment she had called home for decades. She sat on a bench at a bus stop and stared at the street. She was elderly now and had nowhere to go. For quite some time Evelyn had been living on the streets of downtown Atlanta. She slept in shelters when space was available and under bridges when it was not. She ate at soup kitchens, food banks, and sometimes from the trash cans behind restaurants. Evelyn belonged to one of the fastest growing groups experiencing homelessness in America. Elderly women over 55, often invisible and frequently forgotten, the kind of people you walk past without truly seeing. The government included them in reports that few ever read. The numbers kept rising, yet hardly anyone seemed to notice. Something else was happening to Evelyn, something she herself did not fully understand. Her memory was slipping away not all at once, but in quiet pieces, like pages quietly torn from a book. She would forget where she had slept the night before. She would forget what day it was. She would forget names and faces. Early-stage dementia, a volunteer doctor at a free clinic had told her some months earlier. The constant stress, malnutrition, and years of sleeping in the cold had sped up the decline. Some days were clearer than others. On good days, Evelyn could recall her daughter's face, her husband's laugh, and the comforting scent of her old apartment. On difficult days, she could not even remember her own last name, and that is why, when a man in an expensive suit stopped in front of her on Peachtree Street and looked at her as though he had seen a ghost, Evelyn Patterson simply smiled and said, "God bless you, sir." She had no idea she was looking at the little boy she had once held in her arms and called a king, the boy who had grown into a man, built an empire, and never once forgotten her voice. It was a warm afternoon in late September, the kind of day when Atlanta's heat still refuses to loosen its grip even though summer has officially passed. Marcus had just finished a long board meeting. His driver waited out front, but Marcus waved him away. He needed to walk. He needed to clear his head. The meeting had gone well, a major development deal worth hundreds of millions in Midtown. Everyone else celebrated, yet Marcus felt nothing. He loosened his tie and began walking down Peachtree Street, past the coffee shops, office buildings, tourists snapping photos, and construction sites where his own company was raising another tower of glass and steel. And then he saw her. She sat on the sidewalk near the corner of Peachtree and Baker, back against a brick wall, a cardboard sign resting in her lap. Her clothes were worn thin, her shoes had holes, and her hands, those dear hands, were trembling. Marcus slowed. Something about her face, about the way she held her head slightly tilted as though listening to music only she could hear, stopped him completely. His heart lurched like a car striking a deep pothole at full speed. He knew that face. He knew it the way you know the face of the person who raised you not from photographs or distant memory, but from somewhere deeper, from the very bones. It was Evelyn, Miss Evelyn, his Evelyn. She was so much older now. Her hair had turned completely white. Her cheeks were sunken, and her eyes carried a cloudy haze that had not been there before. Yet it was unmistakably her, the shape of her jaw, the gentle movement of her lips when she was not speaking, as though she was always praying. Marcus stood motionless on the sidewalk for what felt like forever, though it was only a few brief seconds. His briefcase suddenly felt impossibly heavy. A passing businessman bumped his shoulder and muttered, "Watch it, buddy." Marcus heard nothing. He walked toward her slowly, approaching like a dream he feared might vanish. Evelyn looked up and smiled that same gentle smile, softened by time, weather, and years of sleeping in places no one should ever have to sleep, yet still warm, still kind. God bless you, sir, she said softly. Anything you can spare. Her voice, that beloved voice, struck Marcus like a blow to the chest. It was the same voice that had read him stories, the same voice that had sung gospel hymns in a tiny kitchen while onions sizzled, the same voice that had called him a king. But she looked at him exactly as one looks at a stranger. No flicker of recognition, no spark, nothing. She did not know who he was. Marcus's throat tightened. He could not speak. He simply stood there staring at her while the city flowed around them like a river parting around to stones. At last he managed to say, Can I buy you something to eat?" "Oh, that is very kind of you," Evelyn replied. "You do not have to do that. I want to. Please." He crossed the street to the deli, hand shaking so badly he could scarcely open his wallet. He purchased 2 sandwiches, a bottle of water, and a cup of hot soup, even though the day was warm, because he remembered that Evelyn had always loved soup, even in summer. She used to say soup was medicine for the soul. He brought everything back and sat down beside her on the dirty concrete, right there in his expensive suit, caring nothing for it. Evelyn accepted the soup first. She wrapped both hands around the cup as though it were something precious, sipped slowly, and closed her eyes. "That is good," she whispered. "That is real good." They sat together in silence for a moment. Marcus fought to steady his breathing and appear calm, but his eyes kept tracing the lines around her mouth, the tremor in her fingers, and the small scar above her left eyebrow that he remembered from childhood. She had once told him she received it from a clothesline when she was a girl. "You are very kind," Evelyn said, looking at him. "Most people just walk on by. Have you been out here long?" "A while now." "I lost track. The days start to run together after a time." Marcus swallowed hard. "Do you have any family?" Evelyn's face clouded. A shadow crossed it like a cloud passing over the sun. "I have a daughter somewhere. We lost touch a long time ago. My fault. Her fault. I do not know any more." She was quiet for a moment, then said something that nearly shattered Marcus in two. "I used to take care of children. That was my work my whole life. I raised other people's babies." She offered a faraway smile. "There was this one little boy a long time ago now. Marcus, the sweetest child I ever knew. His mama worked so hard, and he was just this little thing with big eyes and an even bigger heart." Marcus stopped breathing. "I wonder where he is now," Evelyn said softly. "I hope he is doing okay. I think about him sometimes more than I probably should." Marcus's jaw tightened. He felt tears pressing behind his eyes like water against a dam. He dug his fingernails into his palms. "I am sure he is doing fine, ma'am," he replied, his voice cracking on the final word. Evelyn looked at him, really looked. For a fleeting moment, something stirred in her eyes, something old and deep. Then the fog returned. "You remind me of someone," she said. Then she laughed gently. "But I say that to everybody these days. My memory is not what it used to be." Marcus stood up. He had to, because if he remained 1 second longer, he would break apart right there on the sidewalk. He reached into his wallet and pressed every bill he carried, several $100s, into her hands. "Please take this." "Oh, honey, that is too much. I cannot. Please." Evelyn looked at the money, then at him, and nodded slowly. "God bless you," she said. "You are a good man, I can tell." Marcus turned and walked away. He made it around the corner into a quiet alley between 2 buildings, and then his legs gave way. He leaned against the wall and wept, not quiet, dignified tears, but the raw, wrenching kind that rises from decades of silence finally breaking open like a dam giving way. The woman who had saved him was sleeping on the streets, and she did not even remember his name. That night Marcus did not sleep. He sat in his penthouse staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in his adult life, his wealth felt like a curse. He had everything. Evelyn had nothing. The distance between those two realities felt like the most painful injustice in the world. By the middle of the night, he had reached a decision. He picked up his phone and called Victor Lang, a private investigator he had used for business matters, background checks, and due diligence. This, however, was not business. "Victor, I need you to find out everything you can about a woman named Evelyn Patterson. She is elderly, currently homeless, living on the streets near Peachtree and Baker in downtown Atlanta. I need medical history, family connections, how she ended up there, everything." Victor asked no questions. That was why Marcus trusted him. "I will have something for you by the end of the week." 3 days later, the report arrived on Marcus's desk, 14 pages long. Reading it felt like swallowing broken glass. Evelyn Patterson, no fixed address for many months. Previously evicted from an apartment in Vine City after falling behind on rent. No income, no savings, no active bank account. Medical records from a free clinic visit months earlier showed early-stage dementia, untreated type 2 diabetes, severe malnutrition, and chronic joint pain. The volunteer doctor had recommended follow-up care that Evelyn never received. Then there was Kendra, Evelyn's only daughter. Last known address in Birmingham, Alabama. She had a history of substance abuse spanning many years, multiple arrests, and stays in rehab. But here was the detail that caught Marcus's attention. Kendra had been clean for some time now. She worked as a kitchen prep cook at a restaurant in Birmingham and was enrolled in a GED program, quietly rebuilding her life. Yet she had no contact with her mother. Neighbors said Evelyn had refused to tell Kendra where she was living. The shame of an elderly woman on the streets had been too heavy to share. Marcus set the report down and stared out his office window at the Atlanta skyline, buildings he owned, projects he had created, billions of dollars in concrete, glass, and steel. And somewhere down there on a dirty sidewalk, the woman who had taught him to read was slowly fading away. He was not going to let that happen. But Marcus knew it was not as simple as writing a check. Evelyn was proud. She had always been proud. If he appeared and announced who he was, sweeping her off the streets, she might refuse out of shame and close herself off completely. And there was Kendra, Evelyn's daughter, living several hours away, clean now, but drowning in guilt. Mother and daughter separated by shame on both sides, each believing the other had given up. Marcus needed a real plan built on honesty. He would return to Evelyn, spend time with her, and build trust. When the moment felt right, he would tell her who he was. No tricks, no disguises, just the truth. He would also find Kendra and bring her home, giving Evelyn back the one thing no amount of money could ever buy, her family. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. "Cancel my meetings for the rest of the week, all of them." "Sir, you have the Richmond presentation on Friday. The board is expecting you." "Cancel it, Mr. Hale." "Are you sure?" "I have never been more certain of anything in my life." The next afternoon, Marcus returned to Peachtree Street. He had changed out of his suit into jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. He carried 2 bags, one filled with hot soul food from the restaurant he remembered Evelyn mentioning long ago. Fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread, and macaroni and cheese. The other held bottled water, a warm blanket, and thick socks. He found Evelyn in the same spot. She looked up when she saw him and smiled that same gentle smile. "Oh, it is you again, the kind man. I brought you some food," Marcus said, sitting beside her. "I hope you like soul food." Evelyn opened the container and her eyes widened. "Lord have mercy. Is that Mama Zhang's fried chicken?" "It is, baby. I used to take a little boy there every Friday after school. It was our tradition. She took a bite and closed her eyes. Tastes exactly the same. Marcus's heart pounded. He remembered those Fridays she would spend her own limited money to buy him a two-piece dinner because every child deserved something to look forward to. Tell me about him, Marcus said carefully. The little boy, Evelyn chewed thoughtfully. His name was Marcus Hale. Skinny little thing, always asking questions. Why is the sky blue? Why do birds sing? How come some people have more than others? She laughed softly. I never had all the answers, but he did not care. He just wanted somebody to listen. Sounds like a good kid. The best. Evelyn's voice softened. Most of the families I worked for treated me like furniture. I was just the help come in. Watch the kids. Don't touch the good china. Don't sit on the couch. But Marcus, that little boy, looked at me like I was somebody. He used to say I was his real family. She paused, and sadness crept back into her face. I think about what happened to him after his mama passed. They took him away and I could not stop it. I tried, Lord knows. I tried, but I had no money, no lawyer, nobody who would listen to an older black woman with empty pockets. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. That is the thing about this work, about taking care of other people's children. You give them everything, your time, your love, your whole heart, and then one day they are gone, and nobody thinks about what happens to you. There is no retirement for women like me, no pension, no insurance. You just work until your body gives out, and then you are on your own. Marcus remained quiet, letting her words settle between them. What about your daughter? He asked gently. Evelyn's face tightened. Kendra. She spoke the name as though it caused physical pain. She had problems, bad problems, the kind that swallow a person whole. I spent years trying to save her. Spent every penny I had on programs and treatments. None of it worked. She stared at the sidewalk. You know what the worst part is? I spent my whole life raising other people's children, teaching them right from wrong, keeping them safe, and my own daughter. I could not save her. What kind of mother does that make me? A human one, Marcus said quietly. Evelyn looked at him. Something shifted in her expression, that flicker again, like a candle struggling to stay lit in the wind. You are a good listener, she said. You remind me of somebody, but I cannot quite place it. Marcus almost told her right then. The words hovered on the tip of his tongue like birds ready to fly. But he held back. Not yet. Not like this. She deserved more than a sidewalk confession. He squeezed her hand gently. I am going to come back and see you again. Is that okay? I would like that, Evelyn said. I do not get many visitors. Marcus stood and looked at her for a long moment, this beautiful, broken, extraordinary woman who had given him everything when he was small, while the world had given her nothing in return. He walked away, and with every step the decision inside him grew solid as concrete setting in a mold. He would tell her who he was, but first there was someone else he needed to find. The next morning, Marcus boarded a private plane to Birmingham, Alabama. The short flight gave him every second to rehearse what he would say. He still did not know if it would work. Victor had provided Kendra's address, a modest apartment complex on the south side of the city. Nothing fancy, just 2 stories with a cracked parking lot, but clean and cared for. The kind of place where people were trying. Marcus pulled up in a rental car in the late afternoon. He had timed it to catch Kendra after her restaurant shift. He sat in the car for several minutes staring at the building, wondering what he was doing, a successful man from Atlanta showing up at a stranger's door to speak about her mother. How would it even sound? Who would believe it? Yet he got out anyway, because he had made a promise to himself on that sidewalk, and Marcus Hale did not break promises. He knocked on the door of apartment 214. Footsteps sounded inside. A pause. Then the door opened just a crack. Chain lock still engaged. A woman's face appeared in the gap late 40s. Tired eyes, but clear and alert. The look of someone who had learned caution because the world had not been kind. "Can I help you? Are you Kendra Jenkins?" The eyes narrowed. "Who is asking?" "My name is Marcus Hale. I am from Atlanta. I know your mother." "Evelyn." The door stayed put, but something changed in Kendra's face, a tightening around the mouth. A flash of fear or hope or both. "I do not know what you are selling," Kendra said, "but I am not interested. I am not selling anything. Your mother was my nanny. She raised me when I was a child. I found her last week on the streets of downtown Atlanta. She is homeless, Kendra, and she needs help." Silence stretched. Long silence. Then the chain lock slid free. The door opened wider. Kendra stood there in a kitchen apron, flour on her hands, her eyes filled with tears. "What did you say?" "Your mother is living on the streets. She has been out there for quite some time." Kendra's hand flew to her mouth. She stepped backward as if struck, bumped into the wall, and slid down until she sat on the floor. "No, no, no, no." She shook her head. "She told me she was fine. The last time we talked she said she had an apartment. She said she was managing. That was before the eviction." Marcus said gently. He crouched to her level. "She did not want you to know." "Why?" The word came out broken, jagged, like a shard of glass. "Because she was ashamed. She did not want you to see her like that." Kendra pressed her palms against her eyes. Her shoulders heaved. "I should have checked on her. I should have gone down there, but I was scared. I was so scared she would look at me and see what I used to be. What you used to be is not who you are now. You do not know what I did to her, the things I said, the money I stole. I stole from my own mother to get high." "What kind of person does that?" "A person who was sick," Marcus said, "and a person who got better. That is who you are now." Kendra cleaned for some time, working, going to school. Your mother would be proud of that. Kendra looked at him through wet eyes. "How do you know all this? Who are you?" Marcus sat down on the floor across from her to people on the floor of a small apartment in Birmingham. A wealthy man and a woman in recovery, both carrying the same heavy weight, both trying to find their way back to the same woman. "Your mother took care of me from the time I was very young until I was older. She taught me how to read. She taught me how to cook. She told me every single day that I did not have to be rich to be somebody. I just had to be kind." He paused. "She saved my life, Kendra, and right now she is sitting on a sidewalk in Atlanta with no food, no medicine, and no family. I am going to change that, but I cannot do it alone. She needs you. She does not want to see me." "That is not true. She talks about you. She misses you. She blames herself for what happened. She blames herself." Kendra's voice broke. "It was not her fault. None of it was her fault. I was the one who messed everything up." "Then come tell her that." Kendra was quiet for a long time. She sat on the floor wiping her eyes with her apron, staring at the wall. The apartment was small, but neat. A GED study guide on the kitchen table, a calendar with work shifts marked in blue ink, a small plant on the window so green and alive. Evidence of a life being rebuilt, one day at a time. "I have been clean for some time now," Kendra said finally. "I count every single day, because every day I wake up and I am not that person anymore. It matters. It matters." Marcus agreed. "But every single one of those days I think about my mama. Every single one. And I think about the last time she looked at me, the disappointment in her eyes. I think about that look. And it is worse than any withdrawal I ever went through. Come with me to Atlanta." Marcus said, "Come see her. Tell her what you just told me. What if she turns me away?" "She will not." "How can you be so sure?" Marcus thought of Evelyn sitting on that sidewalk, speaking about the little boy she once loved, wondering where he was, hoping he was okay. A woman who had lost everything yet still had room in her heart to worrying about someone else's child. "Because I know your mother," he said, "and there is not a version of her that exists in any condition, in any place, that would not want her daughter back." Kendra closed her eyes. A tear slid down her cheek and landed on the flour-dusted apron. "Okay," she whispered. "Take me to my mama." While Kendra packed her things in Birmingham, Marcus returned to Atlanta and moved quickly. He had a few days before he planned to bring Evelyn off the streets, and he wanted everything ready. He did not buy a mansion or rent a flashy condo in Buckhead. Instead, he found a modest two-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood in West End, ground floor. Big windows, a little porch with room for a rocking chair. He chose it carefully. Evelyn had never lived in luxury. Placing her in a penthouse would have felt like dropping her on another planet. She needed something that felt like home, something warm and real. He shopped himself, refusing to send an assistant or hire a decorator. He walked through the stores and selected every item with his own hands. A set of heavy cast-iron cooking pots like the ones Evelyn had used in her tiny kitchen decades earlier, a wooden cutting board, a spice rack filled with garlic powder, paprika, cayenne, and thyme, everything he remembered her using. He bought soft bed sheets that felt like clouds after years on concrete, thick towels, a bathrobe, and slippers with rubber soles so she would not slip. Then he visited a used bookstore and spent an hour in the children's section until he found them the same picture books Evelyn had once read to him: Corduroy, The Snowy Day, Stevia. He bought every copy available and placed them on a small shelf beside the bed. When he stepped back and looked at those worn spines and yellowed pages, something inside his chest tightened so sharply he had to sit down. What most people do not realize is that homelessness itself speeds up the loss of memory. The constant stress of having nowhere safe to sleep, the malnutrition, the dehydration, the fear it ages the brain faster than almost anything else. Studies show that people experiencing long-term homelessness develop conditions like dementia at far higher rates than the general population, and they develop them sooner. Evelyn had been on the streets for quite some time. Every day out there had stolen a little more of her memory, a little more of her past, a little more of herself. Marcus was determined to restore as much as possible. He called Dr. Rebecca Ellis, one of the top geriatric specialists in Atlanta, and explained the situation. Dr. Ellis cleared her schedule for the following week. He contacted a nutritionist who specialized in recovery from malnutrition and arranged for a diabetes specialist. He set up a pharmacy account so Evelyn's medications would be delivered straight to the apartment. He placed fresh sunflowers on the kitchen table because Evelyn had always kept sunflowers in a jar on her windowsill. He remembered that. He remembered everything. The apartment was ready. The doctors were scheduled. The books were on the shelf. The pots waited in the kitchen, and the sunflowers brightened the table. Now came the hardest part. A couple of days later, Marcus returned to Peachtree Street. This time he brought no food and no money. He brought something far heavier: the truth. Evelyn was in her usual spot. She looked up when she saw him, and that familiar smile spread across her face. "There he is, my kind friend. I was hoping you would come back today." Marcus sat down beside her. His heart beat so hard he could feel it in his fingertips. He had rehearsed this moment many times in his mind, yet now that it had arrived, every prepared word felt wrong. "Miss Evelyn," he said, "I need to tell you something. You sound serious," she replied. "Are you okay, honey?" Marcus took a deep breath, then another, and began. "When I was very young, a woman taught me how to crack an egg without getting chill in the bowl. She told me you had to be gentle and patient, that everything good takes patience." Evelyn's smile faded slightly. Something stirred behind her eyes. "When I was a little older, That same woman read me a book called The Snowy Day. So many times I had it memorized. I used to pretend the boy in the book was me, walking through the snow and making tracks. Evelyn's hand rose to her chest. When I was around 9, she told me that people were going to look at me and see a poor black boy from the wrong side of Atlanta. But she said she saw something different. She said she saw a king. Evelyn's lips trembled now. Her clouded eyes searched his face, searching hard, like someone trying to read a sign through heavy rain. And every single day, Marcus continued, his voice breaking, every single day for those childhood years, she held my face in her hands and told me the same thing. You don't have to be rich to be somebody, baby. You just have to be kind. The words hung in the air between them like a held breath. Evelyn stared at him. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. Her hands shook. No, she whispered. No. It cannot be. It is me, Miss Evelyn. Marcus. Her voice was barely a sound, a breath given shape. My little Marcus. Yes, ma'am. Evelyn's face crumbled not slowly, but all at once, like a wall that had held back an ocean for decades, suddenly giving way. The tears came hard. Her whole body shook with sobs that sounded as though they were being pulled from somewhere deep inside her. Oh my God! Oh my baby! Oh my sweet baby! Marcus could not hold himself together any longer either. He wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close. They sat there on that dirty sidewalk, a wealthy man and a woman who had been homeless, holding each other as though the world had ended and they were the only two people left. Evelyn's thin fingers gripped the back of his shirt. She held on as if afraid he would disappear, afraid this was only a dream and she would wake up alone on the concrete. I looked for you, she sobbed. I called and called. They would not tell me where they took you. I know. I know. I wanted to keep you. I wanted to fight for you. But I had nothing. Nothing. You gave me everything, Marcus said, and his voice cracked wide open on the last word. People were stopping on the sidewalk now. A woman with a stroller paused and covered her mouth with her hand. A delivery man set down his packages and simply watched. A teenager recording on his phone lowered it and stood still. Something about the scene made everyone pause to people clinging to each other on the ground, the raw sound of grief and joy colliding. Evelyn pulled back and looked at his face, really looked. She reached up with both trembling hands and cradled his cheeks exactly the way she used to, the same gesture she had made countless times when he was small. Look at you, she whispered. Look at what you became, because of you, Marcus said. All of it, because of you. They held each other for a long time. Neither spoke. The city moved around them, cars honked, people walked. The world kept turning, but right there on that small patch of sidewalk time had stopped. Then Evelyn pulled back and the light in her eyes changed. The joy remained, but something darker crept in beside it. Shame. She looked down at her worn clothes, her torn shoes, her dirty fingernails. She looked at the cardboard sign beside her, then back at Marcus in his clean clothes, his healthy face, his expensive watch. She began to pull away. You should not be here, she said quietly. You should not see me like this, Miss Evelyn. Don't. Look at me. Marcus, look at what I have become. I am sitting on the ground begging for change. And you built yourself into something. I do not want you to remember me this way. She tried to stand. Her knees buckled. Marcus caught her arm. I am not leaving, he said firmly. You should. You have a life, an important life. You do not need some old woman from the past dragging you down, dragging me down. Marcus's voice was steady now. Tears still shone on his face, but beneath them lay something solid and unbreakable. Miss Evelyn, you are the reason I have a life. You taught me how to read. You taught me how to cook. You taught me that I mattered when everything around me said I did not. That was a long time ago. It was yesterday. It was this morning. It is right now. I carry your words with me every single day, every board meeting, every negotiation, every time I want to give up. I hear your voice. You don't have to be rich to be somebody, baby. You just have to be kind. Evelyn was crying again, but differently now, quieter. The heavy sobs had given way to a slow, steady stream of tears that came from a place beyond sadness, beyond joy, from the place where the two meet and become something entirely new. I do not need charity, Marcus. I have survived this long on my own. This is not charity. Then what is it? It is family, he said it simply, the way you speak something that needs no decoration. It simply is. You are my family. You always were. And family takes care of each other. Here is what people often fail to understand about homelessness. When someone has lived on the streets long enough, accepting help becomes almost impossible. It is not mere stubbornness or pride. It is something deeper. When the world has taken everything, the only thing left is independence, the ability to survive on your own terms. Accepting help means admitting you can no longer do it alone, and that feels like losing the last piece of yourself. Evelyn was caught in that trap. She had survived for quite some time through sheer willpower alone. Accepting Marcus's help meant admitting she was broken, and she had spent her whole life being strong for everyone else. But Marcus understood this because he understood her. Miss Evelyn, he said gently, I am not asking you to let me save you. I am asking you to let me be your family again. I need you in my life. I have needed you for many years. You do not need me, Evelyn said, her voice thin. Look at everything you have done without me. I have done it all without you, and it has been empty. Every success, every milestone empty, because the one person I wanted to share it with was not there. Evelyn looked at him for a long time. The clouds in her eyes seemed to part for just a moment, and in that moment she saw him, not the wealthy man, not the CEO, but the little boy who used to sit on her kitchen floor asking why the sky was blue. You really need me, she asked, barely above a whisper. More than you know. Evelyn was quiet. A pigeon landed nearby and pecked at a crumb on the sidewalk. The afternoon sun slipped behind the buildings, casting long shadows across the street. Okay, she said at last. Okay, baby, I will come with you. Marcus exhaled a breath he felt as though he had been holding for decades. But I am not moving into some fancy place, Evelyn added, a tiny spark of her old stubbornness returning. I do not need marble floors and champagne. Marcus smiled, the first real smile he could remember in a very long time. No marble floors, he promised. Just a kitchen with good pots and a shelf full of picture books. Evelyn looked at him, and despite everything, the memory loss, the years, the concrete, and the cold, she laughed. A real laugh that started deep in the belly and rose like warm bread. You remember the books. I remember everything. Miss Evelyn, everything. The next morning Marcus brought a simple sedan, not a limousine, to Peachtree Street. Evelyn waited for him with her few belongings in a plastic bag. She looked nervous, like a child on the first day of school. The drive to West End took a short time. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat watching the city pass by. She said little, simply observing. When they pulled up to the apartment building, she studied it carefully. It was modest, brick, and clean, with a small porch holding a rocking chair Marcus had placed there that morning. This is it, she asked. This is it. They walked inside, and Evelyn stopped in the doorway. The apartment was small and warm. Sunlight poured through the big windows and spilled across the hardwood floors like honey. Sunflowers stood bright on the kitchen table. A rocking chair waited in the living room, and on a shelf beside the bed rested a row of picture books with cracked spines and yellowed pages. Evelyn moved slowly through the rooms, her hand trailing along the walls. She touched the kitchen counter, opened a cabinet, and saw the cast iron pots. She lifted one and held it in both hands as though it were sacred. Then she saw the books. She pulled the Snowy Day from the shelf and pressed it to her chest. She stood in the middle of the bedroom holding that old picture book and cried. But these were different tears, not the tears of the sidewalk, not the tears of sudden recognition or shame. These were the tears of someone who had forgotten what it felt like to be cared for and was finally remembering. "You did all this," she whispered. "Yes, Mum, the pots, the sunflowers, the books." She remembered all of it, every bit. Evelyn sat down on the bed and ran her hand across the soft, clean sheets. She looked around the room, and something in her face shifted. The tension she had carried in her shoulders for years, the constant alertness of someone who sleeps with one eye open, began to ease. "I have not slept in a real bed in quite some time," she said softly. "I forgot what it feels like." Marcus sat beside her. "You are safe now." Over the next few days things moved gently. Marcus did not rush anything. He brought Dr. Ellis to the apartment, so Evelyn would not have to go to a strange hospital. The doctor was kind and patient. She examined Evelyn thoroughly, started her on medication for the dementia and diabetes, and created a careful treatment plan. A nutritionist visited twice that first week, working with Evelyn on meals to restore what her body had been starved of for so long: protein, vitamins, iron, the basics most people take for granted, but that vanish entirely on the streets. Evelyn was quiet at first, adjusting. She would sometimes wake in the middle of the night and forget where she was, standing confused in the hallway until the sunflowers on the table gently guided her back. But slowly, day by day, something began to return: not only her health, but her spirit. On the fourth evening, Marcus arrived after work, still in his suit, loosening his tie as he stepped onto the porch. Before he even opened the door, he smelled it. Onions sweating in butter, garlic meeting a hot pan, the deep, comforting scent of chicken simmering in a cast-iron pot. He opened the door, and there was Evelyn, standing in the kitchen wearing an apron, wooden spoon in hand, humming a gospel hymn low and slow, the same sound he had heard on the very first day his mother brought him to her apartment so many years earlier. She turned and smiled. "Sit down, baby. Dinner is almost ready." Marcus sat at the small kitchen table and watched her cook, the way she moved around the kitchen as though dancing, the way she tasted the broth and added another pinch of salt, the way she spoke to the food as if it could hear her. "Come on now. Do not burn on me." When she set the plate in front of him, fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread, and macaroni and cheese made from scratch, made with love, made with hands that still remembered even when the mind sometimes forgot, Marcus took one bite and the taste hit him like a wave. It was exactly the same flavor from a tiny kitchen in East Atlanta decades earlier, the same meal that had once made a frightened little boy feel he was finally home. "Miss Evelyn," he said, voice thick, "it tastes exactly the same." Evelyn sat down across from him and folded her hands. "Some things do not change, baby. The recipe remembers even when I forget." They ate together in the small kitchen with sunflowers on the table and picture books on the shelf. And for the first time in many years, Marcus Hale did not eat alone. Marcus had not yet told Evelyn that Kendra was coming. He wanted to, but something told him that knowing would fill her with anxiety, the waiting, the wondering. What if Kendra changed her mind at the last minute? What if something went wrong? Better to let it happen naturally. Kendra arrived in Atlanta one morning. Marcus picked her up at the airport himself. She stepped off the plane carrying a small duffel bag and still wearing the same kitchen apron she had on when he first knocked on her door. She had not even noticed until she reached the gate. The drive to West End was quiet. Kendra sat in the passenger seat with her hands tightly folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. She looked as though she were heading to a trial, which, in a way, she was. The trial of facing the person she had hurt most in the world. What if she does not want to see me? Kendra asked for the third time. She does. You do not know that. I do. They pulled up to the apartment. Marcus turned off the engine. Kendra did not move. She simply sat gripping her duffel bag like a lifeline. I cannot do this, she whispered. Yes, you can. What do I even say? I am sorry I stole from you. I am sorry I disappeared for years. I am sorry I chose drugs over my own mother. Marcus turned to face her. You say whatever your heart tells you to say, and then you let her respond. That is all you can do. Kendra closed her eyes, drew a deep breath, and opened the car door. They walked up the path to the front porch. Through the window, Marcus could see Evelyn in the kitchen, doing what she now did every afternoon, cooking, humming, coming back to life one recipe at a time. Marcus knocked. Footsteps sounded inside. The lock turned. The door opened. Evelyn stood there in her apron, wooden spoon in one hand, a smile already forming because she thought it was only Marcus coming for dinner. Then she saw Kendra. The spoon fell from her hand and clattered to the floor. The smile did not fade. It transformed. What replaced it was something beyond words, beyond expression, the face of a mother seeing her lost child, the face of every prayer she had ever whispered in the dark being answered all at once. Kendra, Evelyn's voice was barely a breath. Baby. Kendra crumbled right there on the porch. Her knees buckled and she grabbed the door frame to keep from falling. The tears came so fast and so hard she could not speak. She opened her mouth and nothing emerged except a sound older than language itself, the sound a child makes when they finally come home. Mama. Mama. I am so sorry. I am so sorry for everything. Evelyn did not hesitate, not for a single second. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her daughter, pulling her inside. They sank to the floor together right there in the hallway, holding each other so tightly, looked as though they were trying to become one person again. My baby, Evelyn kept saying. My baby girl. Marcus stepped inside quietly and closed the door behind him. He stood in the corner of the living room and watched. He did not speak. This moment belonged to them. Kendra sobbed into her mother's shoulder. Her words came out in broken pieces, jagged like glass she had carried inside for years and was finally releasing. I stole from you. Mama, I took your money. I took your jewelry. I sold your wedding ring for almost nothing. Evelyn held her tighter. I said terrible things to you. I told you I hated you. I told you I wished you were not my mother. Now. And then I left. I just left and I did not come back. And you were out here alone on the streets and I did not even know. Evelyn pulled back and held Kendra's face in both hands the same way she used to hold Marcus's face. The same gesture she had made countless times for countless different children. But this time it was her own. Look at me, Evelyn said. Her voice was firm now, steady. The fog in her eyes had cleared. In this moment she was completely present, completely herself. Kendra Marie Patterson, look at me. Kendra looked up. You came back, Evelyn said. That is all that matters. You came back. But I do not care about the money. I do not care about the ring. I do not care about what you said or what you did. None of that matters now. What matters is that you are standing in front of me clean, alive. Here, recovery from addiction is not only about the substance. It is about everything the substance destroyed along the way, the relationships, the trust, the years that were lost. Experts say rebuilding family bonds after addiction can take time, sometimes longer, and sometimes it never fully happens, because forgiveness is not a single act, but a daily choice to keep choosing love over resentment. Evelyn had made that choice long before Kendra walked through the door. She had made it years earlier while sitting on sidewalks, sleeping under bridges, and eating from soup kitchens. Even in her darkest moments, Evelyn had never stopped loving her daughter. She had been angry and heartbroken, but she had never stopped. "How long have you been clean?" Evelyn asked softly. "Sometime now. I count every single day." Evelyn smiled, a real smile, the first one in this conversation not mixed with pain. "You count the days, every single one. Then you are stronger than you know." "Baby." They sat on the floor for a long time. Kendra told her mother everything: the rehab stays, the relapses, the final time she got clean and knew it had to last, the job at the restaurant, the GED classes, the small apartment in Birmingham where she was learning to live like a normal person for the first time in her adult life. Evelyn listened. She did not interrupt. She did not judge. She simply held her daughter's hand and listened. "I was so scared to come here," Kendra said. "I thought you would hate me. I could never hate you. I am your mother, and a mother's love has no conditions." Marcus quietly slipped out the front door and sat on the porch. He could still hear them through the open window, the murmur of voices, occasional sobs, and long stretches of silence that said more than words ever could. He looked out at the quiet street. The afternoon sun was setting. The sunflowers Evelyn had planted on the porch the previous week were beginning to bloom, and for the first time since he had found Evelyn on that sidewalk, Marcus felt that everything was going to be all right. Some time later, you would not have recognized Evelyn Patterson. Her cheeks had filled out. Her eyes were clearer. The trembling in her hands had steadied. Dr. Ellis had placed her on a treatment plan for the dementia, and while the condition could not be reversed, the decline had slowed dramatically. With proper nutrition, regular sleep, and far less stress, Evelyn's mind was recovering what it could. She still had good days and difficult days, but the good days were beginning to outnumber the difficult ones. Kendra had moved to Atlanta and found a small apartment only minutes from her mother's place. Marcus had connected her with a program that helped people in recovery find stable employment, not a handout, but a genuine hand-up. Kendra now worked as a prep cook at a restaurant in Midtown, better pay, better hours, and a manager who understood her history and gave her a chance anyway. Every Sunday morning, Kendra walked to Evelyn's apartment. They cooked breakfast together: eggs, grits, bacon, and coffee in mugs that did not match. They talked about nothing and everything. The weather, a show Evelyn liked on television, a recipe Kendra had learned at work, small things, normal things, the kind of things mothers and daughters are supposed to talk about but had not in years. Evelyn had also started volunteering twice a week at a community child care center in her neighborhood. She received no pay and needed none. She simply showed up and did what she had always done: held babies, read picture books to toddlers, wiped noses, tied shoes, and told every single child that they mattered. The staff loved her. The children adored her. They called her Miss Evelyn, and every time she heard that name from a small voice, something inside her clicked back into place, like a missing piece of a puzzle finally finding its way home. Marcus came to Evelyn's apartment every Thursday evening. Their tradition: he would bring ingredients, she would cook, and they would eat together at the small kitchen table with the sunflowers. And Evelyn began to remember things, not everything, not always, but in bright flashes that cut through the fog like sunlight breaking through clouds. One evening, while they washed dishes side by side, Evelyn suddenly paused. "You used to cry when your mama left for work," she said. "Every single morning you would stand at the window and watch her car drive away. Then you would come to me, put your head on my lap, and I would hum until you stopped." Marcus's hands went still in the soapy water. He had forgotten that completely. But the moment she said it, the memory flooded back: the cold window glass against his forehead, the sound of his mother's car fading, the warmth of Evelyn's lap. You remember that. Some things the mind forgets, but the heart keeps. On another evening Evelyn brought out something she had kept in her bedside drawer, a small, worn envelope. She placed it on the table in front of Marcus. "What is this?" he asked. "Open it." Inside was a photograph, small, creased, faded. A little boy sitting on a kitchen counter with a huge grin, missing two front teeth, holding a wooden spoon, flour covering his face. Marcus stared at it. His chest tightened. "That is me," he whispered. "You are helping me make cornbread," Evelyn said. "You got more flour on yourself than in the bowl. But you were so proud. You kept this." "I kept it in my wallet for many years. When I lost the apartment, I put it in my shoe so it would not get stolen. I carried it everywhere, through shelters, under bridges. I did not always remember your name, but I always remembered your face." Marcus held the photograph in both hands as though it were made of glass. The image was barely visible after decades of being folded and unfolded, carried and hidden, pressed against skin and soaked by rain. Yet the little boy's smile still shone through the damage. She had kept his photo in her shoe while sleeping on the streets, while losing pieces of her memory, while the world forgot about her. She had never forgotten about him. "Miss Evelyn," he began, but he could not finish. He simply held the photo and let the tears fall onto the table. Evelyn reached over and placed her hand on his. "You were always my boy, Marcus." Even when I could not remember why, something was happening to Marcus Hale, slowly and quietly, like ice melting at the edges of a river. The man who had built walls around his heart, who had eaten dinner alone for many years, who had measured every human interaction by what it could produce, that man was changing. It started small. He began noticing things he had never noticed before. His assistant, Gloria, who had worked for him for many years, he had never asked about her family. It turned out she was raising 3 children on her own. Her husband had passed away some time earlier. She arrived at work early every day so she could pick her children up from school after her shift. Marcus had never known. He had never thought to ask. He started asking not in a corporate, performance review way, but simply as a person. "How are you? How are your kids? Is there anything you need?" The first time he did it, Gloria looked at him as though he had grown a second head. "Are you feeling okay, Mr. Hale?" "I am fine, Gloria. I am trying to be better." The change spread through the company like a warm current. Marcus started a program for employees with caregiving responsibilities, flexible hours, backup child care, emergency funds for unexpected medical bills. It was not a massive corporate initiative. It was simply a man who had finally remembered what Evelyn had taught him, that people matter more than profit. And then he decided to go even further. He sat in his office one evening looking at the photograph Evelyn had given him, the little boy with flour on his face, and he thought about all the other Evelyns out there. All the women who had spent their lives raising other people's children, cooking other people's meals, cleaning other people's homes, and had nothing to show for it when they grew old. In America, the vast majority of domestic workers have no retirement benefits, no pension, and no employer-matched savings plan. Many are paid in cash, which means no Social Security contributions. The National Domestic Workers Alliance estimates that only about 1 in 10 domestic workers has any form of retirement savings. When they can no longer work, they fall through every crack in the system, invisible in life and invisible in old age. Evelyn had fallen through those cracks. Millions of others were falling right now. Marcus picked up his phone and called his legal team. "I want to set up a foundation, a real one, fully funded. I wanted to provide housing assistance, medical care, and retirement support for elderly domestic workers and caregivers who have aged out of the workforce." There was a pause on the other end. "That is going to be expensive, Mr. Hale." "I do not care. Make it happen. What would you like to call it?" Marcus looked at the photograph one more time. The Evelyn Foundation. That evening he drove to Evelyn's apartment. She was on the porch in her rocking chair, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Kendra was inside making tea. "Miss Evelyn, I have something to tell you." "Sit down, baby. You look like you have a lot on your mind." He sat in the chair beside her. "I am starting a foundation, a charity. It is going to help women like you, women who spent their lives taking care of other people's families and received nothing in return. Housing, medical care, a safety net so that nobody else ends up where you ended up." Evelyn was quiet. She rocked slowly in her chair. The sunset reflected in her eyes. "What are you calling it?" "The Evelyn Foundation." Evelyn stopped rocking. She turned to look at him, and her face did that thing again, holding everything at once. Joy and sadness, gratitude and disbelief, all layered together like sheets of glass. "You named it after me. There is nobody else I would rather name it after." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. She reached over and took his hand, holding it tightly the way she used to hold it when she walked him to school, though many years earlier. "You are still that same sweet boy, Marcus," she said softly. "You always were on a Thursday evening when the air had grown cool, the kind of cool that makes you grateful for warm places and warm people." Marcus pulled up to Evelyn's apartment. He could see the light on in the kitchen before he even left the car. He could smell it through the cracked window: fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread rising in the oven. The same meal, always the same meal, and it never grew old. Kendra opened the door. She wore an apron, flour on her hands. She had been helping Evelyn cook something she had never done as a child, but was learning now, making up for lost time. "She has been cooking since early afternoon," Kendra said with a smile. "Would not let me do anything except peel the potatoes." Marcus walked into the kitchen. Evelyn stood at the stove stirring something in her cast-iron pot, humming that same gospel hymn low and slow, the sound that had formed the backdrop of his childhood. She turned and smiled. "There he is, right on time. Sit down, baby. It is almost ready." The table was small: 3 chairs, 3 plates, 3 mismatched glasses. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. But as Marcus sat down and looked at the 2 women in that kitchen, he realized something. This was the richest table he had ever sat at. Evelyn still had her difficult days, mornings when the fog rolled in and she could not remember what month it was, afternoons when she called Marcus by his mother's name. The dementia had not vanished. It remained underneath everything like a tide that pulled back but never fully disappeared. Kendra was still healing, to still counting her days, still waking every morning and choosing to stay clean, still carrying the weight of everything she had done even as she learned to set it down. Nothing was perfect, nothing was completely fixed, but they were here together, and that was enough. Evelyn brought the food to the table. She sat down and reached out both hands. Marcus took one. Kendra took the other. Evelyn bowed her head. "Lord, thank you for this food. Thank you for bringing my children home." Both of them. When she looked up, her eyes were clear and fully present. She looked at Marcus with the same expression she had given him countless times in that tiny apartment in East Atlanta. "You do not have to be rich to be somebody, baby," she said. "You just have to be kind." Marcus squeezed her hand. "You made me rich, Miss Evelyn, long before I made my first dollar." Evelyn smiled. Kendra wiped her eyes with her apron, and the 3 of them ate dinner together in the small apartment with sunflowers on the table and picture books on the shelf. The people who raise us, the nannies, the caregivers, the grandmothers, the neighbors who step in when no one else will, they are the most important people in our lives and almost always the ones we forget. They work in our homes. They hold our children. They shape the human beings we become. And when their work is done, When their bodies give out and their savings run dry, the world looks the other way. But their fingerprints are on everything we are. Every act of kindness we show, every moment of patience we practice, every time we choose love over indifference that came from someone who probably never received thanks. Do not wait. Do not wait until it is too late to find them. Do not wait until they are sitting on a sidewalk with a cardboard sign. If there is someone who shaped you, someone who loved you when they did not have to, reach out today, not tomorrow. Today, because sometimes the smallest act of remembering is the greatest act of love. Now I want to be real with you for a moment. This story is fictional. Marcus is not a real person. Evelyn is not a real person. But the problems in this story are very real. Elderly homelessness in America is rising every year, and the women who spend their lives as domestic workers, nannies, housekeepers, and caregivers, the vast majority of them retire with nothing. No pension, no savings, no safety net. That is not fiction. That is fact. I wrote this story because I believe the people who raise us deserve to be remembered not just in our hearts, but in our systems, in our laws, and in the way we build a society. Whether it was a nanny, a grandmother, a neighbor, or a teacher, someone shaped who you are. Someone gave you their time when they could have given it to someone else. And that gift, that invisible, unpaid, unrecognized gift, changed the course of your life. If you want to learn more or help, look into organizations like the National Domestic Workers Alliance or your local programs for elderly homelessness. Even a small donation or a few hours of volunteering can make a difference. And if there is someone in your past who loved you like Evelyn loved Marcus, find them, call them, tell them what they meant to you. You might be surprised how much it means to hear it. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness matters. See you in the next one. Love you.